in my comfort zone? The answer is yes. Do you want to go somewhere dangerous? Usually, more often than not, the answer is yes.
Well, the world
So
has
yeah,
changed since you began that, and I know when I was reading your stuff, that does not necessarily prevent you from venturing. You're still right out there in the forefront, maybe a little more security conscious, but I just think that's very brave and willing to do what it takes to get the knowledge that you seek and have the
well,
experiences.
I don't know how brave it is. It's more stupidity. Um, I,
Well, I wasn't going
I
to
go
say
where
that.
I charge in where angels fear to tread. Um, one of those things is people are people fundamentally,
Yes.
and for the most part, when you're one on one with them, it's not a problem. I have had incidents. I was in Cairo during the Feast of Abraham or Ibrahim one year, and I had a young lady with me, and because we stood out, we were stoned.
Oh,
Um, it just there are certain things you have to be very conscious of, but when you're one on one with the individuals, they're always engaging, they're always wonderful. And so I guess in my old age, I've become a little bit more conscious about it, just because I have someone in my life that I care tremendously about, and so I have to worry about her and her future. But I still I need the truth. I don't care where it takes me.
yes.
Um, and your listeners, I don't necessarily know what they know about what I do, but um, as one of the things I am is quote unquote a demonologist. Um, I almost say that in cringe because it has such a bad connotation because of television and movies. It literally means, however, someone who studies the evolution and history of demonic entities. And I do it, or I originally have done it as a scholar. I've
Yes.
read all the ancient texts. I go back and look at every exorcism case I can get a hold of. One of them is a 17th century one right now I'm working on, and you're having to read it in, you know, obscure dialects, and you're having to kind of read between the lines because certain things. So that kind of thing. I try to be a scholar first and foremost, but then because so many people are just in need, they're in pain, they're in trouble, they're afraid. That's why I have to go into the field more often than I care to admit. It's somebody has to do it, and I just look at it like unless somebody is better than me is willing to go do it, at least I can try. But that oftentimes can be more risky than going into a foreign country, honestly.
It
Um,
can.
and it's not just the demonic idea. Most of the people who claim to have demonic entities really don't. It may be psychological, it may be a physical ailment, it could be that they're on bad meds. Um, it could be that they just have a regular haunting going on in their location. But television has so warped the pop culture reality that they're afraid. But as you do that, even though I debunk about 199, so half of everything, but about half a percent of cases, um, it's the people that you have to be afraid of.
Yes. I agree with that because you don't know what you're walking into. You don't know who has mental health issues that are creating these problems sometimes. And we're
Yep.
only about 20 seconds away from our first break. But I do want to let people know that my guest tonight is Kyl Cobb, Sir Kyl Cobb. And we will be back in about 3 minutes with more information from him. And please, if you have questions, get in the chat room and let us know. we'll get them taken care of for you. See you in 3.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour. And we are back. You are listening to Paranormal Experienced Radio. I am Kat Hobson, your host, with my guest, Kyl Cobb, he's just amazing. If you start reading about him, if you start talking to him, he's been everywhere. He's done all kinds of nifty things. He's been in places that the average bear has no interest in showing up in. And yet there you are. I found it interesting that if there's a pyramid, you found it. Pretty much.
Yeah, and I literally have climbed most of them. I've been to Egypt a few times, and it was really great when I was in Egypt. I have a driver, Hasham, and he was my driver on and off for about 15 years. And he would tell me who to bribe, how much to bribe, and get me into places I could not legally get into. And so
cool.
I actually have climbed one of the Great Pyramids. Really? I have been able to crawl through Egyptian tombs closed to the public. And, I love Egypt. It's one of my favorite places. But the last time I was in Egypt a few years ago, we went down to down in Luxor, which is to the south. That's the old capital, which in Greek used to be called Thebes, like with Oedipus Rex, Oedipus the king, takes place in Thebes. And so I'd gone down to Luxor, and there's a temple to the goddess Hathor outside of the city. And I told for this particular trip, my driver had not come all the way down to Luxor. He was doing some stuff for us for our return trip. And so I was in Luxor. And so I told the hotel to arrange for me a trip to Hathor, the Temple of Hathor. I knew I was in trouble when, first of all, they asked me about 6 times, "Are you really sure?" The next morning, when I was supposed to go, I thought I just had a driver. That's all I was looking for. The next morning, there was a platoon of soldiers assigned to protect me.
Oh, my word.
And they were sent, they would go ahead of my vehicle, and they would close the roads to let us pass to get to the temple. So at that point, I realized how dangerous the country had become. And, they were terrified that an American tourist would be killed. And they took extraordinary means to protect me. I felt so grateful, but I got to walk around in the Temple of Hathor basically by myself.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm lucky that I'm decent at reading Middle Kingdom hieroglyphics. And so I was able to go through and actually read the story of the temple. And it was the most amazing experience to be able to walk around in a temple like that without tourists. It was so cool.
I cannot even imagine. I mean, because you're educated, or you educated yourself, you are fluent in hieroglyphics and such, right?
Yeah.
So you can just...
I was naturally predisposed, it turns out, to learn hieroglyphics and never knew it. It turns out I was dyslexic as a child and no one realized it. And I couldn't learn to write cursive, and they couldn't understand why. My mother actually taught me how to read and write by drawing pictograms on the paper. So like the word who, she would draw an owl for the sound.
Oh, wow.
And what it ended up being is I was, for many years, I got injured a few years ago and lost it, but I was ranked as a language adept. And what that means is I could learn any written language within 3 or 4 days. And with Egyptian, it was particularly easy because I don't see English letters in order anyway. And so because hieroglyphics aren't written in a particular order for the most part, I could look at a hieroglyph and it was just like reading English. Once you knew what the symbol was, you still had to learn the vocabulary, but it became very, very easy to learn at that point. T.E. Lawrence, Lawrence of Arabia, mm-hmm. wrote in his book that language is the key to open the door to a culture. And for me, these days in particular, because when I'm trying to do some research on something, I go back and fumble my way through whatever the text is in that language, if I can do it. And sometimes it's hard and sometimes it's slow, but it changes so much. Later on, we may talk about, I don't want to get too far off the topic.
It's but okay. This is fascinating.
Well, one of the things I've done, and I'm going to get in trouble with about half of the planet Earth soon. I'm going to be burned as a heretic by everybody. But one of the things in working on my next book that I discovered is Lucifer, the famous Lucifer, right?
Right.
It is a typo.
Get out of town.
Nope, literally. He is a typo. And I just kind of stumbled across it. I get people call me all the time, paranormal teams, different scholarly people, say, hey, what do you know about this demon? Well, so I was putting this next book together, and it didn't want to be the book I wanted it to be. As it started out looking at some exorcism cases and disproving them, but it kept changing itself. It kept wanting to point me to particular names, demons, and things like that. So I somewhere along the line, the question of Lucifer came up. And I didn't, I grew up a good Southern Baptist, right? I'm now an Anglican which is Church of England.
Yes.
But